Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining in the message today. Our prayer is that it would strengthen you and encourage you in your faith. And if it does that, please consider sharing this content so we can continue to spread the good news into our communities, to our friends, and our families, and all around the world for Jesus. And if we haven't had a chance to meet yet, then please introduce yourself via our website, which is victorychurchmj.com, or send us an email at connect@victorymj.com. We can also have the conversation on social media. Just look for Victory Church MJ and you'll find us on all the social platforms. Thanks again for joining us. Blessings. Now let's head into the message.
If you have a Bible, you can open it or turn it on. We're going to be in Luke chapter 10. As already been mentioned, we're going to be in the parable of the Good Samaritan today. And I'm not sure if I've ever even actually preached on the Good Samaritan. I may have done in past, but I don't remember it, so I'm quite excited. I've loved getting into these parables again and just hearing what Jesus is saying to us. You know, and just to remind you, you know, whenever we come to the parables, there's always certain characters involved. And we're meant to try and identify who might we be in this story, what kind of fits us where we're at. And then one of the things that we need to do with that is ask God, so what do I need to do with this now? How am I supposed to apply this to my life? Now that I've learned something, what am I supposed to do with it? And this is one of probably the most famous parables that Jesus ever spoke about, because it's even spoken about today. Have you ever heard the phrase, oh, there's such a good Samaritan? Well, it comes from this parable, written 2,000 years ago, spoken by Jesus to a Jewish audience. And yet it's as applicable to us now as it was to the people that Jesus was teaching it to then. And as I was kind of preparing for this message, I did a quick kind of googly search on Good Samaritan stories. And here's some of the headlines that came up. Couple goes 15 miles out of their way with their truck to deliver a barbecue for a couple who couldn't fit it in their car. You kind of think they'd have thought about that before they went to buy it. Man finds phone on street after woman left it on the roof of her car and drove off. But he called the last number and found it was her husband and managed to get the phone back to her. Nobody else has ever done that before. One man stood at a gas station and used his savings to buy gas for nurses who were working long shifts during COVID. One man in India made his motorcycle into an ambulance so he could take people who were too poor to be able to get to the hospital, and he would give free rides. One teenager used his jacket to shield an elderly lady from the rain as she walked to her car. All amazing and commendable acts of service, but they fall short of what Jesus was saying in this Good Samaritan parable, because what Jesus was saying to his Jewish audience would have rocked their world. Seriously, it would have blown their minds. They would have just been like, you have got to be kidding. There's no way that would ever possibly happen, and we're going to get into that as we go through it. But it was such a radical message, and it's meant to be even right today. That's why we're talking about today, because what Jesus spoke 2,000 years ago is just as applicable right now, and it's meant to rock our world as well. It's such a powerful message that if every person on the planet practiced this one principle for 1 month, our world would look completely different. It is that powerful and life-changing. And so we're going to walk through this parable together. Are you ready? Good. The amazing thing is, the message of this parable is incredibly simple. It's amazingly powerful, but it's incredibly simple. And yet, it's very difficult to live out. Because what Jesus is going to do through this parable, he's going to define who our neighbor is and just how we're meant to love them. Which sounds easy, but it actually isn't. Jesus is going to raise the bar significantly in what it means to love our neighbor. So in Luke chapter 10, verse 25, he says, on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law? Jesus replied, how do you read it? So what we've got to understand is, first of all, this guy is an expert in the law, what we would understand to be a lawyer. Somebody who knows the law inside and out. And the law that he's talking about is the Mosaic law, the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That's the Mosaic law. This guy would know that inside and out. He would be pretty much able to recite all 5 books, if you can imagine that. It's not like he's got an Old Testament tucked under his arm and he's walking around. These things are on scrolls, but he would have had to memorize it. He knows it. He is versed in this law like you wouldn't believe. And so with the context that we get here as he stands up to test Jesus, that Jesus would have been teaching an audience, a Jewish audience on the whole. And this guy, a Jew, a lawyer, an expert in the law, stood up to question Jesus. And he asks this question, basically, what must I do to be saved? And it's amazing that even though he knows the law inside and out, he still doesn't get salvation at all. Because the most significant word in his question is the word do. For him, it's all about how do I earn salvation? How do I get approval from God to make sure that I get to be in heaven, or I get whatever that salvation may look like? There must be something I can do to make myself approved by God. That God's going to look at me and say, wow, Barry, I've never seen anybody like you. You've just got to come and live with me. You're so good. You're just the benchmark for everybody else to follow. That's what he's saying. What can I do? Show me all the things. If I fulfill all this law, would that be good enough for you? But Jesus knows there's an agenda behind this question. It's not just a genuine question. There's something else going on here. It's the Son of God. He knows what's going on in this man's heart. And so he uses the Socratic method to answer a question with a question. Don't you just hate it when people do that? I asked you a question, I wanted an answer, I didn't want another question. But Jesus turns it back on him. So where the lawyer thought he had Jesus in the spotlight, now the lawyer's in the spotlight and everybody's looking at him as this expert in the law. And yet when we kind of flip ahead to the New Testament, which unfortunately this lawyer didn't have, in Galatians 2:16, Paul reminds us that nobody will ever be saved by obeying the law. He says the only thing the law was good enough for was to remind us how much we need a Savior, how much we will never be able to be good enough to earn God's salvation. It's what we've just celebrated in Christ, that we don't have to earn it anymore. It's been provided by Jesus. If it was left up to us, we're in big trouble. We can't earn our way into God's good books. And so in verse 27, the lawyer answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, wholeheartedly, is what he's saying. With all of your being. And love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus replied, you've answered correctly. Well done. Go to the head of the class. And do this and you'll live. I can imagine the lawyer all of a sudden, his kind of shoulders dropping a little bit. Because he already knows he hasn't done that. Because what that statement replies is, love the Lord your God from the first breath to the last breath of your life. Just love God. Don't expect anything from God. Don't need anything from God. Just love God because of who he is. Oh, and by the way, do exactly the same for your neighbor. How many of us have loved our neighbors without any hidden motive? We can't even do it from our family most of the time. There's always a little hook attached somewhere. Human love is as selfish as it gets. And yet this is the love that Jesus wants us to love God with and love each other with. And so the bar has just gone from here to like here. And the lawyer knows he can't fulfill that, and he hasn't fulfilled that. He's already blown it. So now what? But Jesus is also saying, but so have you. You can't achieve this in and of yourself. None of us have that capacity to love like Jesus is asking us to love. So what do? Just pack up and go home? No, we're reminded in Romans 5 that it's the Holy Spirit that fills our heart with that love. He fills our heart with love for God to remember what God has done for us, and that same love then goes out to the people around us. We can't do it in ourselves. We need the love of God filling us so that we can both love God. Doesn't Scripture say we loved because he first loved us? That's how we know how to love. And have you ever wondered how, this, when we read that, what the lawyer says, he responds, you must love the Lord your God. That you must is a command. He's not actually saying, wouldn't it be nice if you could? He's actually saying the only way that you could ever earn salvation, if it was possible, is you have to. He's commanding you to. Have you ever tried to command somebody to love you? Doesn't work. I remember when we got married 27 years ago. I didn't stand there with my wife and say, I promise to love you. And by the way, you must love me. I didn't have to command her because she loves me and I love my wife. You don't have to command somebody to do that. Neither could you come to me and say, I command you, Barry, to love tomatoes. That's tomatoes in Canadian. I can't stand them. For the last 53 years, I've hated tomatoes. So you can come and command me all you want to love them. It ain't going to happen. But that's kind of what Jesus is saying. That's the kind you're supposed to do that. I'm commanding you to love God like that. And none of us can. We're stuck. We are lost. We need God's help so much. And then to try and love our neighbour the same? Well, now we're in trouble. We can't earn our salvation. Because anything, even if this guy was doing that, if he could just do it, the fact that he was wanting to do it already disqualified him because it was for a selfish reason. We kind of can't win, really. So in verse 29, the guy realizes he's on the back foot a little bit here. He's kind of bitten off more than he can chew, and I would kind of encourage you not to go up against the Son of God. You tend to lose most of the time because he knows better than we do. So he's on the back foot and he's trying to wiggle his way out of this because all the eyes are on him now. And he says, but he wanted to justify himself. So he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbour? He's trying to get himself off the hook a little bit here because he just feels like totally nailed. He doesn't know what to do. And what we've got to understand is the Jewish mindset here would be very narrow. They would be quite literal in this understanding. They would be, well, my neighbour is literally my neighbour, the person who is next to me, the person who lives next to me, the person closest to me. That's my neighbour. So he's kind of thinking, well, if I just have to love them, I could probably manage that. I'm okay with that. At a stretch, he might kind of think, well, maybe the same kind of people as me. We've all got our people, haven't we? People who think like us and believe the things that we do and behave the same way. I maybe be okay with them. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. Maybe one of those or two of those I could maybe be a neighbour to. If you really, really want to push me, it might extend to Jewish people in general, but it's not going... Gentiles, not a chance. You want me to love a Gentile? No way. I'm going to the end of the Jews, and that's as far as it goes. And yet Jesus is going to blow that concept completely out of the water. He is about to upset this guy majorly. Because this principle crosses all of those boundaries: racial, cultural, political, whatever boundary and prejudice you can come up with, this principle crosses all of them. And if we truly practiced it, our world would change. And the command to us is, as disciples of Jesus Christ, is we are the ones that are meant to model it. We are meant to be living this out every single day of our lives. And what Jesus is about to unfold here is that you can't limit your neighbours. Your neighbour is every other human being on this planet, bar none. No exclusions whatsoever, whether they agree with you or not, whether they ever make a decision to follow Jesus or not, whether they have the same belief system as you have not, whether they have the same kind of lifestyle. None of that matters. Get all of that off the table because it's not a factor here. If they live and they breathe, they are your neighbour. And I'm commanding you to love them the same way that Jesus has loved you. That's the message here. This is why it's so hard, because I'm like, I can understand the lawyer's thinking. There's certain people who think, yeah, I could probably stretch to that, but I don't know how to be a neighbour to those people sometimes. I just don't know. We all have those kind of limitations. I don't know what to do beyond that. And so the guy's asked this question, who is my neighbor? Jesus doesn't really answer it. He just launches into this story, as he often does. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Literally half dead means he's almost dead. They've really done a number on this guy. If somebody doesn't help him, he's going to die. He is done. And this road, literally from Jerusalem to Jericho, was a 3,000-foot drop from Jerusalem to Jericho. That's why I said he was going down. It's about 17 miles long, and it was often known as the Way of Blood. It was that notorious. You took your life into your hands walking this road. It was really bad for getting robbed and beaten and killed. But then there's something happens that kind of, I can imagine Jesus' audience thinking, yay, a priest happened to be going down the same road. And when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. What? He did what? Because in their mind, if anybody's going to help this guy, the priest is going to help him. He represents God. Surely the priest, the religious person, is going to be the one that helps him. But it's okay, because so too a Levite, when he came to the place, he saw him and passed by on the other side. Hang on a minute, Jesus. That's not right, because the Levite was the priest's helper in the temple. They both represented God. Why would not at least one of them stop to help this guy? He's a Jew. It's not like he was somebody else. The implication is that he's a Jewish man, so why are they not being a neighbor to one of their own? And I think there's several reasons in this, maybe. The priest has likely just been serving in the temple. He's just done his stint at the temple. He's probably going home to Jericho where he lived. He wants to get home, play with his kids, give his wife a good cuddle. Just wants to get home and sees this guy lying by the side of the road. And I'm like, oh, do I really want to get involved in that? And part of the Jewish law that this lawyer knows about is that if he touches, this man is dead, and he touches him, he's got to go back to Jerusalem and go through this whole 7-day ritual cleansing, because you weren't allowed to touch a dead body. So he doesn't know, is he dead? If he's only half dead, I'm okay, because he's not actually dead. But I don't know, because he looks like he's dead, so I'm like, I don't want to get involved. Maybe it's a trap, because the robbers and thieves of the area would beat somebody up and leave the body there, hoping that somebody would be lured in to help them and they'd pounce on them as well. So he's like, I don't really want to get involved in that. And then the Levite comes along, and maybe he's been walking down the road behind the priest and thinks, well, if he passes by, it's okay for me to do that. What kind of example are we setting for those around us when we choose not to obey the command to be a good neighbor, to be loving those that God puts across our path? But both of these were meant to represent God. Both of these should have been the ones, if anybody was going to do anything good, these were the people. Just like if anybody's going to do this, it's you and me as disciples of Jesus that are meant to be setting the example. Where are we failing to care for those that God has brought across our path? And then Jesus throws a real zinger in the story here. They were not ready for this. But a Samaritan. A Samaritan? Are you kidding me? You throw a Samaritan into a Jewish story, you are going to get a reaction. And I can only imagine the bristles that would have gone through Jesus' audience as he said that word. But as he traveled, he came to where the man was. And when he saw him, he took pity on him. And that word pity in the Greek word is this word called spladma. It kind of like this, it's this gut-wrenching compassion that you can't not do something to help somebody in that situation. I don't know, if you think of as a parent, if one of your children falls over and hurts themselves, what do? You say, oh wow, that's really bad. No, your gut reaction is to run and help them and pick them up and try and make it better whatever way you can. And that's what this pity is. This man is like, I can't not do something to help you. Such is the compassion that's in him. Does it remind you of Jesus? So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. The oil would have soothed them. The wine would have been like a disinfectant. Then he put the man on his own donkey. I mean, we don't understand the animosity between these two people groups. This is like, you did what? Because every Jew in that audience is sat there thinking, there's no way I would do that for a Samaritan. Put him on my donkey and I walk? Are you kidding? And he brought him to an inn and he left him there. Oh no, he didn't. He took care of him. He didn't just drop him off with the innkeeper and say, can you just help this guy? I've got business to keep on going. No, because it says the next day, which means he stayed the night. And again, this audience of Jesus is just like, he did what? He wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that as a Jew. I wouldn't do that for a Samaritan. Why would he do that? And then he took out 2 denarii and gave him to the innkeeper. A denarii, the kind of going rate for a lodging in an inn would be about 1/32 of a denarii. So he's basically giving the innkeeper about 2 months worth of stay at an inn. We kind of miss that. We think, oh, he just gave him a couple of coins to keep him going. You say, no, he paid for this guy's hotel stay for 2 solid months. Remember, the guy's half dead. He's not just going to get better by a good night's sleep. He needs help. And then he says, beyond that, look after him, and when I return, I'll reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Can you imagine giving somebody the blank check and just saying, whatever you need, just take care of it. I'll sort it out when I get back. The innkeeper could have had a heyday with that. But such is the guy's compassion for this other man that he has to do whatever he has to do. How many of us go so far in helping somebody, but when it starts to cost us, we're like, whoa, think I've gone far enough. That's not what Jesus is saying here. If you really love somebody the way that I love them, then cost is not a factor here. I love what Martin Luther King says as he comments on this parable. He said, the priest and the Levite asked, what will happen to me if I stop to help this man? The Samaritan asked, what will happen to this man if I don't stop to help him? I wonder how many of us have that kind of question in our hearts when God gives us a burden for somebody. We're trying to find out what's the least I can do to help them, rather than what is God requiring of me to do to help them. And we've got to be wise with that. We don't need to be foolish with it. We don't just kind of hand money out here, there, and everywhere and throw ourselves at anybody and everybody. We want to go to God and say, God, if you're bringing this person across my path, what am I supposed to do to be Christ to them? What's the best way that I can help them? And then whatever he asks of us, we do it, because that's what we're meant to do. And every Jew in the audience is saying, what Samaritan would do that? Because no Jew would do that. Their hatred for each other was as intense as it gets. They didn't just like each other. They prayed often that, if I don't see any Samaritans in heaven, I'm good with that. Such was their hatred for the Samaritans, because the Samaritans were half Jews now. When the kingdoms divided between Israel and Judah, the northern kingdom Israel was invaded by the Assyrians, and they intermarried, and so now they're not pure Jews, so to speak. That's why the Jews hated them. And then the Samaritans hated the Jews because they just seemed to be so full of pride and self-righteousness about their own heritage. And this just grew and grew and grew. But Jesus is saying, the way this Samaritan had compassion on this guy is the way I want you to have compassion on those that I bring across your path. And we're meant to sit up and take notice, because that is meant to challenge us to the core. That we can't just sit back and say, oh, it was a nice story. I hope somebody takes notice of that. We're meant to take notice of that. As followers of Jesus, we're the ones that are meant to be modeling it. It's what Jesus requires of you and of me. That we're meant to show the love of God. When we think about communion and the actual example of Christ dying for us and giving up everything for us on a cross, how can we not be like Jesus? We've got to ask the question, has his love truly flooded my heart in such a way that it's causing me to reach out to other people? Or have I just kind of taken it for myself and I'm okay with that? Because that's not the kind of love that Jesus is talking about. Because if we've understood the love of God for us, then it has to be a love that goes out this way as well. If we've limited to a vertical relationship, it's not real love. Love for God will compel us to love the people around us. We cannot limit it even just to believers. We can't just limit it to our own people who think like us and act like us and behave like that. That's not how it works. And it's got no agenda to it either. We're not even doing it so that they'll come to know Jesus. We would love for them to come know Jesus because it's the best thing that could ever happen to them. But we don't do it because of that. We do it because there's such a love in our hearts that we can't help ourselves. It just gets in us and it flows out of us. We can't put up boundaries to exclude other people just because they don't agree with us. John 13, it says, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this everyone will know you're my disciples if you love one another." John 15, "My command is this," my command again, "love each other as I have loved you." Jesus hasn't just told us he's loved us, he's shown us how he loved us by laying down his life. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You're my friends if you do what I command. Luke 6, "But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you." How easy is that? Not really. "Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, don't withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back." And here's what they call the kind of golden rule: do to others as you would have them do to you. One pastor said, "Do to others as Christ has done for you." And he did it all. He held nothing back. It cost him his life. Ephesians 5, "Imitate God, therefore, in everything you do, because you are his dear children." We're meant to imitate God. We're meant to model this. We're meant to be the people. If anybody's going to be a good Samaritan, it's followers of Christ. Live a life filled with love. Following the example of Christ, he loved us and offered himself as a sacrifice for us, a pleasing aroma to God. What's going to draw people more to God than displaying the same love that God has shown to us? We don't just walk around telling each other we love each other. God is saying, I want you to be able to show it in your actions. The people will have no doubt in your mind that you follow Jesus because you love like Jesus loved. And so Jesus has completely flipped this lawyer's question on its head. The lawyer's trying to get out by asking, well, who can I limit myself to being a neighbor to? And he's saying, no, you're asking the wrong question. The question is, are you being the neighbor that God has called you to be to those he's bringing across your path? How are we going to go above and beyond like the Samaritan did? How are we going to love even when it costs us? And it can cost us dearly. It cost Jesus dearly. What are the prejudices in my life that are stopping me from going beyond my comfort zone and loving people outside of my comfort zone? You know, we can talk about it all day long, but Jesus is calling us to action. You know, there's a story about D.L. Moody, who's a 19th century American evangelist. And lots of the crusades that he did, he would have a guy with him called Ira Sankey who would sing. And one day, Moody was at a convention in Indianapolis. And Sankey was there, and he said to Sankey, he said, I want you to meet me at this certain street corner at 6 p.m. And so he did. Sankey met him at the street corner at 6 p.m. and Moody just simply set up a box and said, stand on there and start singing. Right on the street corner. So Sankey did. And sure enough, because of his wonderful voice, the crowd started to gather. And when there was a decent enough crowd, Moody just got up and started to talk to them and said, if you want to know more about Jesus, follow me to the opera house. And so they walked down the street to the local opera house, walked in, and it wasn't long before the auditorium was full to the brim. And Moody got up on stage and he started to tell people about Jesus, about the life that is available in Christ alone. And then the conference delegates started to arrive who needed the space in the auditorium. And Moody simply said, I'm sorry, brethren, we have to close now because the convention delegates are here and they want to discuss the question, how do we reach the masses? Who was doing it? We don't need to just sit around and talk how we're going to do it. We just need to start doing it. Start loving people and stop making excuses about why I shouldn't. As we close, I got this kind of from one pastor as I was studying this, and I loved how he put it. 3 simple ways to remember how to love our neighbour well. Take notice, take pity, take action. Look for the people around you who are hurting and help them. Take pity on them, have that compassion, and if you don't have it, ask God to give you it. To fill your heart with a compassion that reaches out to others, and then simply do something to help them. Could be anything. Find ways to help the people that God has put around you. Why don't we start?
Hey everyone, thanks for joining on the message today. I hope you found it encouraging. And if today was your day, if you decided you're going all in for Jesus, if you became a Christian, then today is the best day of your life. So what's next? The next thing you need to do is tell somebody about it. So you can let us know by emailing us at connect@victoryMJ.com or fill out our connection card on our website, which is victorymj.com/connect. Now, if you would be so bold as to partner with us, you could do that simply by liking and sharing this on social media or wherever you consume this content. The other way you can partner with us is financially. You can donate securely on our church app or on our website, or even e-transfer at admin@victorymj.com. And if you do any of those things, we would really appreciate it because it helps us continue to make content just like this to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. So thanks again for joining us, and I hope to see you all in the next one. God bless.